Hello and welcome back to another Python 3 recipe. In today's video we're going to see how to handle default values, how to associate a default value to a key, but when we want to get or to set the key. So for this snippet, for this recipe, the problem statement is we have all the movies in our database, let's say, and some of those movies have been reviewed, and for each movie the data structure we're using is a dictionary with the key being the name of the movie and the value being the list of the reviews. So every time a user review a movie, we just append to this list. So here we want to see how the problem statement is, how do we check the numbers of movies, the number of reviews for each movie, and insert a new review for a given movie in the most Pythonic way. So the answer for this is to use the get, set default, and default dict method wisely. So first problem, getting the number of reviews for all the movies in our database. You see here, not all movies have been reviewed. So this dictionary just contains a subset of all the movies possible. So how do we get the length of the number of reviews? Here, this is the bad way to do it. So here we are looping on all the movies in our database and we get the count of so we map here, we are calling the dictionary mapping to the movie. So we map from the movie to get the list, and then we get the length, which is the number of reviews. This is fine as long as movie reviews contains the key movie, but like we saw here, not all the movies have been reviewed yet. That's why when Python reaches Python 3 is the future movie, it complains because this key is not in this dictionary. So that's why when you hit here at this line, it complains. So let's see how to do it better. Well, in order to do it in a better way, you can either have a try except block like this, and you try to catch this exception. If you get this exception, then you know that the movie has not yet been reviewed, and then you assign a count of 0. But this is so much boilerplate, there must be a better way, and yes, there is. The most Pythonic way, the good way to do this, is to call, instead of this way of getting, so this is the quickest way to get an item to a key, a value associated to a key in the dictionary. But if you're not sure if the key is in the dictionary, you can instead use the get method and provide an alternative value to be returned in case if the key is not found in the dictionary. So here we are doing the same thing, we are looping on all the movies in our database, and we get the movie here from the movie reviews. If the movie is not found, return the empty list, and when we get the length, in the case where the empty list was returned, it will be 0. So for example, Python 3 is not yet reviewed, so it's not in this dictionary. So get movie comma empty list will be return the empty list. So that's why we get 0. What about insert a new review for an already or not yet reviewed movie? So let's say a user has viewed all the movies in our database and has given a score of 4.0 to all of them. How do we make sure that to handle that case? Well, we can loop over all the movies in our database and see if the movie is already reviewed, which is this test, which is what this test is doing. If movie in movie reviews, meaning the movie has already been reviewed, then you append the key 4, you append value 4 to the list of reviews that we already have for that movie. Well, if the movie is not yet reviewed, then we are going to initialize it with just one review, a list with just one review being the one given by the user, which is 4.0. This works, but it's not Pythonic at all. And remember, the goal of this snippet is to see how to handle default values in the most Pythonic way. So this is one way to do it, but it could be done better. But let's see this one first before seeing the final and best version. So here we'll do the same thing. We loop over all the movies in our all the movies in our database, and we call the setDefault method. This setDefault method really could have been named eventually setDefault then get. Eventually setDefault then get. And let's see why I say that. Well, when you do setDefault, you pass in the key as usual, and then this is telling Python, okay, set the default if this movie is not yet in the movie reviews, set the default for that key as this, and then finally get it. So for this movie, for example, let's say when we are looping here, because this movie is already in the movie reviews, set the eventual part, this one won't be done because the movie is already in the dictionary. So we are just doing the get bit, which is why when we here we do set default, we pass in this movie or this one for that matter. We are just doing the get part, which is actually returning to us the list, and then we append 4 to that list. But for the case of Python3 is the future movie, which has not yet been reviewed, like you see here, Python3 is the future, it has not yet been reviewed. What happens? Then this is not an eventuality anymore, it's a certainty. So setDefault will indeed add a new key to this movie reviews, mapping to an empty list, and then get, like it does for the other two. And when we get the empty list and then append 4 to it, we have at the end, when we print the final dictionary at the end of the operation, Python3 is the future, pointing to a list with just one element, which is 4.0. But there must be a better way, and there is. The best way, because this setDefault, you see, it's not very intuitive from the name to know exactly what it's doing. It could have been called eventually setDefault then get, but it's so long. So the best way is to use defaultdict, and the way defaultdict works is a bit like setDefault, is that you tell Python, you initialize, instead of creating a list from a dictionary from scratch, what you do is you tell Python, I want to create a dictionary for which, in the case where a key we are trying to get or set a key that is not yet in the list, return for that key a list, an empty list. So every time we are calling, when we hit this dictionary, when we do a get on this dictionary, on this movie reviews default dictionary, if the key that we are trying to access is not yet there, Python is going to return to us an empty list. If you're trying to set to it with the key and the key is not yet there, Python is going to create for us a list, and then we can use that list, and that's exactly what is happening here. So like before, we create we try to get that, and that's exactly what is happening here. Movie reviews, crazy movie. When I print it, you see Python returns an empty list. So that's what's happening here. And when I print the actual container, which is the actual default dictionary, you can see it's of type defaultdict, with the default value being always a list, and we can see that it already contains crazy movie, pointing to the empty list. Now let's say I now add Python to all the other 2 movies that we had earlier. I just add them like we did before, and then I print. This is what our dictionary looks like now. Now I loop over all the movies in our database, and I append. I don't have to test anymore. I don't have to test like we did for this one. For this case, I don't need to call setDefault because the default is already there for me anyway, if the key is not there. So I have to just use the braces syntax. I call the movie. For example, Python3 is the future. It's not in the movie reviews, but when we do this, Python doesn't complain, but actually does the job for us perfectly, and that's what's happening here. Yes, so you see here, Python 3 is the future. It's now mapping to a list with one element 4.0. So default dict, that's how it's used in Python to be more Pythonic in the way you handle default values for a dictionary. And that's the end of this recipe. Hopefully you learned something new. If the case, please give it a thumbs up. Also feel free to ask any question in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to answer those. As always, you will find all the code for this snippet in the description. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and thanks for watching.